Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome, good afternoon, happy Monday everybody. Let me know if everything is working, if you guys can hear me and everything. Hopefully I had this set up right. I was scrumming last minute. My buddy Raphael was helping me out getting that intro sorted, so big shout out to Raphael. Having fun with this, so pumped guys. Everyone hear me all right? Everything sounding good? Just making sure the live is working. Looks like it's good on my end, but I just would like to always check with you guys. Hope everyone's doing well. Sounds great. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, guys. Yeah, absolutely pumped about so many things, and I'm so happy you're here with me this afternoon. It's fun to do this in the afternoon because I'm much more awake than when I do live streams in the evening. But thanks for showing up today. Talk for a couple minutes just generally about the course, just to connect, because I know some of you guys have been really excited about this, and I'm seeing tons of comments coming in, so pumped to see you guys in here. Thank you for coming. Yeah, so let me just, I haven't really been able to just straight up talk to you guys, so this is great. I am so excited about all this, and before we get started, just huge thanks to Diego and Paper Pot Co. This really is a special partnership, and I'm really excited to be working with them on this, and they're really making this possible, because without their support, I would never have done this, and it's just so much time. And as I'm getting into it now, I'm realizing how much of a time commitment this is and how much brain space I have to pour in this, because it's not just like a normal YouTube video. So huge thanks. Other things over there, do check out paperpot.co/Josh. There'll be additional resources on there for the course that Diego's working on developing, so that should be cool. This is also released as a audio form in podcast form on the Farm Small, Farm Smart podcast. That's why I can't be a podcaster, right? So it's available too. So you can stream it anytime you want on YouTube. Any of the modules, you can listen to them, watch them as many times as you want. But if you prefer to listen to it in an audio form in a podcast app, you can do that. So that's available as well. Otherwise, yeah. So we'll be doing these pretty much every Thursday. It'll be a new module. I'm going to try to be as consistent as I can, and then the live stream will be the following Monday. But one thing I want to point out is that the live Q&As, I want them to be based on the topic. So if I really want to stick to those kinds of questions, things that are related to the ideas in the video. So the first module was about setting goals. Hopefully you got to watch that. I want to stick to those questions, and I'm here for you guys. So whatever you want me to talk about, that's what I'm here to do. I want to treat this like a class as much as we can through YouTube and being distance learning and stuff, because you guys know I've said before I was a high school math teacher for 5 years. So I'm trying to think a little bit creatively about these live streams and this class to make it feel like a course that you can be following along every week and those sorts of things. And so that's what I came up with. So I think that's pretty cool. These live Q&As will stay up, but I won't be checking comments and stuff like that on there. If you want questions answered, come here. If you do have general questions about farming or whatever, I'm happy to answer those at the end if there's time, but I always am going to give preference to the people that are here asking questions about the actual module, because as I said, I do want to try to treat this as a course. So that being said, oh man, there's a lot of you guys in here. This is awesome. So yeah, let me couple of housekeeping things to point out first. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the course in general, again, to a little bit more detail. Hopefully you guys watched the intro video. I've also, you guys know I'm not a person to ask for money from you guys, but a lot of people have asked me hey, I want to donate money or I want to do something. So I did set up a PayPal account that you can use if you want. Zero pressure. You guys know nothing will ever be behind a paywall, but I know some people were I want to donate money. Where do I send it to? So there is a link in the description below if you guys are interested. But again, no pressure from me whatsoever. I probably won't even really talk about it very much, but it is there if you're interested. But anyways, I just want to let everybody know about that. All right, cool. So we'll be talking about the course a little bit, and then if you guys have questions about setting goals in the first module, please get them in, and I will get to those. All right. Yep. All right, cool. So in general, I'm not posting the course. What's it called? I was a teacher and I can't remember the syllabus or whatever. It's still in flux a little bit. I'm still playing with the outline a little bit as I'm developing each module and how to work things out, because as I said, I wasn't, if you watch the intro, I wasn't able to just dedicate this much time to like sitting down and doing a course. So I'm doing it week to week. I'm staying ahead a little bit, but it's just I'm working on it as I go, and I just need you guys to be aware of that. I'm crazy busy right now. So the video that is coming out on Thursday is about researching your market and selling products. We'll get into crop selection and pricing, and I really have stressed a ton about this course that the first few videos are about the business side of farming, because if we're not careful about that stuff, we won't have successful farms. So that's why I know a lot of you guys want me to get into all the nerdy technical growing stuff and systems, and I'm going to nerd out hard on that stuff. No, I promise you guys, but it is coming up. But I do want to really talk about a lot of the business stuff and make sure that you're aware of that, and then you're developing a plan to be successful. We'll talk about finding land and farm design, prepping soil, creating beds, all the stuff that I do with that. And then I want to talk about no-till practices and, living soil, all the stuff that I use for my soil practices. Get into crop planning, building infrastructure, tunnels. I want to do a section on winter growing, irrigation, seed propagation, nursery management, direct seeding and transplanting, some interplanting. We'll go through all the tools I use and all the supplies, where I get them from, and what I like and what I don't like. And I'll get into as many details as I possibly can. Pest management, weed management, and then post-harvest, wash pack, harvesting, and then, basic composting. So pretty similar to what I had outlined in the intro. This is where I'm at right now. But again, I can't stress enough that this course is I'm not calling this the market gardening course or the small farm course. This is the Sattin Hill Farm course. This is what I do. This is what I found successful. And I'm just going to share with you my experiences and all the stuff that I've learned and what I do. And my farm is very simple at this point, and so I'm going to be sharing those systems with you guys. So anyways, all right, I think that's everything I had to say. And there was also, if you are interested, I did have an interview with, I think someone here mentioned it. Let's see here. Johnson. So the last Small Farm Smart was, Diego and I had a little chat. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that, go check that out too. Thanks, Sierra. I have to say, the one thing I've realized about the course, which has been great, is that I don't feel like I'm making YouTube videos. I feel like I'm teaching, which is great. And I'm not like forced to like cut up into shorter clips and put in B-roll. And I put in B-roll when I need to, but I don't have that like pressure of like keeping people's attention and stuff. Like I'm just trying to deliver information. So it's kind of refreshing. I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, I'm just looking through comments here, see if you guys have questions. Steven, do I know you, Steven? We got Morgan Gold in the house. What's up, Jason? Jason's a fellow camera nerd, but he's getting into gardening this year, so I'm excited. He's like pumped about the course. Gene's here. Just saw Gene. Gene and I were, it was like 70 something degrees today. Is that how warm it is? Something like that. We're out in shorts and planting lettuce today. It's beautiful today. It was awesome. It's like the fall spring we get in February. It's not really spring yet. All right, so you guys get some questions in about the first module. And Jill from St. Louis. I'm just scrolling through the... Okay, a lot of people... I'm just scrolling through all the comments, guys. I can't only read so fast. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. All right, got to be quiet about this, I guess. Question about amendments. So again, like I'm going to stick to questions related to the first module. There is a video. Let me just say one thing. Like if you are looking for specific information that I've delivered in the past, because I've made a video on pretty much everything related to the way I farm. If you go to my YouTube channel, there's a search bar. Just type in amendments and that video will pop up. So if you're curious about what I've done in the past, and you're looking for information, that is a very useful feature that's there. And if you type in lettuce, like every video I've ever made about lettuce will show up, those kinds of things. All right, Clint, what about dealing with the water department from Oklahoma? So I guess the question is, what's the issue? Is it, are you getting water that's not good? Are you, like, what's the question about dealing with the water department? A lot of times people are curious about what's in their water. So, you can ask them for water sample tests. A lot of places will give them to you like once a year, or you can call, or you can go online. They publish monthly water reports here in Raleigh, I think, that you can go check. I used to use that because when I was a brewer, I used to look at all the stuff in the water to try to figure that out. So, yeah, I'm curious about what the question is about the water department. All right, Scotty, what's a realistic goal to get up and running on farming, homesteading for new homesteaders on raw land? Well, as I said in that first video, was really about figuring out what you are looking for. And I keep saying this because really when you're thinking about setting up your farm or your farm business, you need to think about what you're looking for and what your goals are. So if the question is, can you feed your family? Can you feed your community? Can you have enough food to go to a farmer's market? How much do you want to sell? It's going to vary a lot. But if you're really starting on raw land, that's going to be tricky. Like, do you have previous farming experience? Do you have tools? Do you have access to compost? How much money do you want to put in up front? Or are you going to be mainly using labor instead of money and time instead of money? There's a lot of questions there. Is this a full-time job? Are you just doing this part-time? I think if you want to start growing food for your family, that's a great goal to start with. And that's an awesome thing to do. So, Scotty, maybe you can chime in about that. If it's money, I don't know what the goal you're asking about is. Is it output? Is it money? That sort of thing. Yeah, the biggest thing is Johnson saying here about getting stuff ready is prepping the ground, and that's true. All of my techniques, which I will get into, and I've made videos about in the past, excuse me, is the time you have to put in up front to prep the land, kill all the weeds, build soil, and when you do all that sort of no-till prep, that minimal disturbance stuff, that's when you develop systems that allow you to grow a lot easier and have less weed pressure. So really the best thing you can do is pick an area and put a tarp down. That's the best thing you can do to get started. Just kill everything that's there. But it does take time. There are other ways to approach that in the future, which I will talk about for sure. How many customers do you serve with 1/8 of an acre? What is the maximum amount of land you can grow by yourself? That is a great question. This is perfect for today. So right now I'm kind of fluctuating between, I'd say 4 and 6 restaurant accounts. But I'm only growing at most like 4 crops at a time. So that's where I'm at right now. And that's been pretty good. In terms of, I'm guessing you're asking about restaurant accounts because if you go to farmer's market and bring as much food as you have. So the other question is, how much land can you cover yourself? So I'm on 1/8 of an acre. And one thing that I've talked about a lot is the fact that I have the tunnels that I have allow me to have a lot more output than I would have if the beds weren't covered. And so that's huge for me because I noticed that in my second season, every time I planted a bed and I lost a crop for whatever reason, pests or whatever happened, I would have to spend all the time flipping that bed, replanting, and all the stuff that goes into that. And for me, it became very inefficient. And so what I had to do is at some point, I made a video about this forever ago. I actually I tarped like a bunch of beds, and I just was like, it's too much. Then I can't focus on what I need to focus on because I'm growing a lot of high rotation crops. So right now with my system, I have 24 48-foot beds. We can call them 50-foot beds. And that's a lot for me to do part-time. But I work probably 15 to 20 hours a week on the farm. So full-time, I could probably do 1/4 of an acre. If I had 6 tunnels and that was like my full-time job, I think I could do that. It gets really crazy late spring and into summer though, because things grow real fast. And if you don't harvest them right when they need to be harvested, they get too big and you're constantly flipping beds. So like this time of year is pretty chill because, I flipped 2 beds today, probably get a couple more in the next couple weeks. Like it's pretty slow. But, if you're growing stuff think about it this way, like if you're growing stuff that's in the ground for like 6 weeks, well, every week you have to flip how many beds? Like if you have 24 beds, every week you're flipping 4 beds. Right? So you can kind of figure that out. If you have more tunnels, more beds. So can you flip 8 to 10 beds a week? Like something like, can you do that yourself? Think about that. That's a good long day, probably maybe 2 days. And then harvesting might have to get split into 2 days, that kind of thing. So I'd say 1/4 of an acre of growing intensive vegetables, but it depends again. Like if you're growing things that take a lot longer, that maybe have lower value, but you don't need to tend to them as often, then maybe you can get away with a little bit more land. But I think there's a lot of people that they'll get started, they'll have a little success, and they just expand. And then I did this. That's what I was just saying before. And then what happens is you have too much space and you can't manage it, and it stresses you out. The weeds are out of control. The crops aren't doing well. You're not getting a lot of yield per foot or yield per bed. And I really can't stress enough about like keeping it as small as possible. Really try to work on your efficiencies and get like every pound per bed out of there, and then think about expanding. And the best thing about expansion is that if you are thinking about expansion, like in 6 months or a year, just put down a tarp, and when you need it, it'll be ready for you. So hope I answered your question. Amount of land you can, yeah, I would say probably about in this kind of system that I'm doing, I'd probably say about 1/4 of an acre would be a lot to manage for sure. If you're doing all the harvesting, all the delivering, all the marketing, all the business stuff, invoicing and all that stuff. Like I'd probably say 1/4, and that would be a lot still too. And a lot of the reason I can get it down to 15 to 20 hours a week is a lot of the systems I've put in place, setting up efficiencies and ways to minimize the time I need to spend working on the farm. That has helped significantly. And at first, like, you're going to be really inefficient, so you have to work on that stuff. Anyways. Hopefully I answered your question. I'm going to talk about this on the video on Thursday about setting up relationships with chefs. Thank you so much. Yeah, 62 in Baltimore. Yeah, it was warm today. I don't know. It felt like it was like 70 out there. Daniel asked about my camera systems. I have a whole nother channel about camera gear and videography and content creation. So there should be a link down below. The channel's called Josh Sattin. You can find me on there. I nerd out about cameras hard. So if you're interested in that, go check that other. Yeah, there you go, Johnson. Yeah, you got it, Daniel. I didn't mean to be rude at all. I just I get questions asked all the time. I'm like, most people don't know there's that search bar. So I do like to tell people about that. Yep, totally. That's what I said at the beginning. Like, I'll take questions on this topic, and then I'll open up for general questions at the end. I don't know how long we're going to go for. I don't know. Maybe an hour and a half or so. My throat's been getting a little scratchy lately. I've been doing a lot of talking making these videos. Scott, what kind of profit margins are you seeing after you have your paid capital off? I don't have these figures. I wish I did. I'm not the best at keeping these things, and I'll try to convince you guys to be better than I am. I also don't keep track of my labor, so that's, it's hard to figure that out when you're kind of like being casual about that stuff. But once you have the capital paid off, and the initial like infrastructure and stuff, my like operating costs are extremely low because I put down the bulk of my compost already. I already have my irrigation and my tunnels. So I'm just buying seed, which for me is like maybe a few $100s a year. And then compost and amendments is a few $100s maybe a year, maybe 500 at most. If you're paying for water, that's a significant expense. There's a little bit of electricity that you have to use to run your wash station and your refrigeration. But other than that, like plastic bags, that's the thing about farming is like once you get rolling, like that's why it can be profitable because there's really not much input there. Potting mix, that's another input to consider. But yeah, it's not a lot. The profit margin is really high. It pretty much is all labor. So if it's just you can call it profit, or you can call it just not profit, and you're paying yourself, however you want to look at it. But I don't have firm numbers for you, and I apologize. I wish I did. I just don't. I am not in an HOA, and in this area, you can use pretty much any land for agriculture. So you have to check for yourself in your area, depending on where you are. But I don't have any like covenants or anything like that in my area. I can. There's no one regulating what I'm doing here. So, but yeah, I checked. You almost every land you can set for agriculture around here. How do you translate financial goals to what you grow? I think that is a big question. Yes, I'm going to get into this because which video is that? For next week? This is the tricky part. I'm a YouTuber, so for me, it's like I make the video and then I put it out, and I get confused when like I have a video made for Thursday, but I'm working on a video for next week. I get all confused. And I don't know if you guys, it's like right after COVID started in 2020, I went to daily vlogging for a month, and I thought it was going to be cool. I'm totally off track here. I thought it'd be cool to like be ahead a few days, like so in case something happened and I couldn't get to making a video. I just got so confused, so I had to just do it the day before. So I'm getting a little bit confused. But yes, I think we'll talk about choosing crops, and a lot of what that's going to be is deciding what crops you want to grow, how much you can get for them, and then you can work backwards and figure out how much you need to grow of each thing. So I am going to cover that for sure, and that's a big part of the business strategy in figuring out what crops to grow, how much you can get for them, how many beds of each you need, and how many flips do you need per year, and you can sort of set up your farm that way. We're going to go through that stuff, I promise. I have not made use of grants. I think the best thing would be the NRCS grant to get tunnels. I think the application is in the fall. I haven't done it personally, but that is one thing to consider. When I was at Raleigh City Farm, it was a nonprofit, so we did get some money donated from some places. But for my private farm, I haven't gotten any grant money for that kind of stuff. Cronin Scott, look at this perfect timing. The nonprofit versus pro. There's a couple things. One is I'm an entrepreneur and an educator at the same time. So it kind of pulls me in both directions, because for me, when I am working at the nonprofit, it's very education based, right? We're very much community focused, which I absolutely love. But I think what happens in a lot of nonprofit situations is that it's not focused as much on production. And I have a very production type mindset where I'm like, let's grow as much food as possible. And maybe it's because I had run my own farm for 2 years. I really had this production mindset where I was like, I want to grow as much food as possible. And I also think that for me to be showing people what I'm doing, I want to talk about it in a for-profit sense, because for people to do this and to actually grow a lot of food for their community, they need to get paid for it. They need to support their family with the work that they're doing, because you put a lot of time in. And so that's where that comes into. And after a while, I that's kind of what I felt about it. I just was like, I would rather be showing a for-profit model and sharing that with people, and then still educating. But I don't know. That's just how I felt after a while. And if you've ever worked in a nonprofit in general, just things move very slowly, because every time you want to do something, you have to wait for a board meeting, and then you'll bring it up, and then someone will have something they have a question about, and then they'll table that thing, and it'll get researched. Then the next board meeting will come. Things just move very slowly, and I know that's just something to consider when you're working with nonprofit groups in general. So that was kind of my thing. Was like, let's just do this. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's put up a sign. Let's do the thing. And so that was just it was frustrating after a while. So that's kind of, I don't know if I answered that completely, but I guess that's what I have to think about right now. It's been a while since I've even thought about it. Yep, is a big part of the equation for sure. All right. I am skipping over questions that are unrelated to the module, so I'm not ignoring you guys, but just in case you asked a question, we will save miscellaneous questions till the end if we have time. But I want to stay focused on the questions related to this module, like I was saying before. Wait, great to see so many people in here, guys. Thank you for coming today. This is awesome. So a question here. Anything is possible, but is it possible to create a market garden on an urban size plot, 15 to 2,000 square feet at the most? That would be very small. So for example, one of my tunnels is 14 by 100. So that's 1,400 square feet. So that would be very small. I think it would be hard to be profitable on that scale, but I think it's definitely doable to get started, depending on what your goals are, right? It could be more of an education thing. It could be to feed your family. You said market garden, so I'm assuming you're talking about selling. The other thing you could do is you could add other things like microgreens. You could actually grow a lot of microgreens in a very small space if you want to try to get your revenue up, and you can sell those in your area. So it's small. I mean, for me, when I say that's 1,400 square feet, that's just the tunnel. That's like not tool storage. That's not composting. That's not where you're keeping your amendments and your wash station and all the other things. You got raw materials coming in. Like if someone drops a load of wood chips or compost or bags of potting mix, like where does all this stuff go? Where's your nursery? So I think if the total space is 2,000, that's going to be really tight. I think that's going to be really, really small. But depending on what your goals are, I'm not going to say don't grow food. Like it's awesome. But yeah. So I think for me, my 3 tunnels, my 3 farmers friend tunnels and the nursery is about 1/8 of an acre is what I figured out a while ago. But you got to also keep in mind, like, it's the distance around the tunnels and between the tunnels and all that stuff, because it all adds up. And if you're in a very urban area, you got to think about sunlight too, because if you're really packed in there, you may not get a lot of sun. And for me, like, I don't get a ton of sun with my trees back there. We'll talk about that in a future video, though, about farm design and stuff. All right, John. Nice hat, by the way, in that photo. For someone looking to work full-time but starting farming part-time, would it be better to set goals the first year is really low, looking to sell in the neighborhood and maybe a local club? Yeah, that's a great way to get started. I'm a huge fan of the part-time farming for a lot of reasons. One is to see if you like it, see if you're good at it, see if your market can support it, have minimal capital to get started. You can keep your regular job so your family isn't struggling. There's a lot of great things about it. I think keeping your goals low is good, but I think trying to push yourself a little bit and have like if we keep the bar really low, then you're not going to really get to that higher point. But being realistic about the income, and that if it's just something that's kind of like extra for you, or you can add it on to what you're doing, I think that's great. I think that's a great way to think about it. Sign local neighbor and maybe local. Yeah, that's great. Like if you have a way to sell locally, if you live somewhere where you can set up a little farm stand or something, or I'm going to talk about this in the video on Thursday, but yeah, I think that's great. Like I really think part-time farming is cool. And I think there's one, if you do listen to the podcast today with Diego, that we talked about this, like the stigma of farming, how everyone thinks you need to be like working 1 million hours and killing yourself and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a great way to do it, John. All right, so goal is to grow food for the family, but sell the extra they have on the side. That's great, yeah. I'll get into this later. I don't buy that much compost after I've built my beds. I don't use that much. Sorry, that's not related. I fell into the trap. I answered the question, not related to the video. Daniel, asking about some business stuff. Now, I'm really hesitant to give out business advice because I'm not an attorney and I am not an accountant. But I do have a single member LLC. Again, this is what I've done. I'm not telling you this is what you should do. All right. So not business advice. But yes, I itemize my deductions and taxes and all that stuff. So I'm a single member LLC. It's pretty easy to set up. Yeah, you register, you get an EIN through the feds, and then you set up your LLC with the state. It's pretty easy. There's a little bit of a fee for the LLC thing. Every state's going to be different, but that's how I have mine set up. Did I buy my property with intent to farm? That idea came later. No, that came later. I think I talked about this in the video, like my background. No, I mean, I wanted to live a little more sustainably, grow some of our own food. Like we started with chickens and started growing some veggies. But no, I had no plans on being a farmer. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. 24 100-foot beds for one full-time person? Yeah, I mean, I have 24 50-foot beds. 24 100-foot beds would be a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of planting. But if it's full-time, yeah. I file, again, not giving business advice. I follow a Schedule F, which is the farm form. Big Mike, good to see you in here. Aside from social media, farmers markets, etc., do you have any suggestions on how best to negotiate making friends and colleagues and networking with other local part-time farmers? Yeah, social media and farmers market is probably the best way to meet people. Yeah, I don't think there's other like networks and stuff. That would be cool. Are there have you tried going to farmers markets and like talking to the people there? That's probably the easiest way to do it in person. Social media is great too. I mean, if you start following, if you find farms in the area, and I know you asked for things other than that, but I'll give you some strategies here. And find farms and then follow them, message them. People are pretty responsive. Farmers are pretty cool. I can't think of any other ways though, really. I mean, how else does anyone meet anyone nowadays anyways? Yep, this is all going to be, this is better, where to sell crops to, video on Thursday, promise you. Go into it deep. All right, how many months do I grow food? What do you do in the months you don't grow? So I had been growing food 12 months out of the year. And this year I'm going to take the summers off. And I've talked about this plenty of times, but it's the heat. The crops don't like it. And my kids have been in year-round school. It's just a common thing in public schools here. It's really weird, but that's what we do. And they're going to be in traditional schools, so they'll have summers off. I want to hang out with them. And I want to work on videography, doing more documentaries and work on my own videography projects that I do, and that kind of stuff in the summer. So I'll probably grow like 9 months out of the year, something like that. Michael's asking, what earning potential do you expect from an eighth of an acre? So I don't have a hard number for you, but I think you should be able to get $10,000 per tunnel, if not more, if you're really cranking on it. I don't know about in the first year, because your yields aren't going to be as good. But again, we'll get into crop planning and pricing and stuff, and you can start to do those calculations yourself. And because really it's going to base a lot on, where you are and what you can sell your stuff for. Because if I can sell lettuce for $10 a pound, but in some other city you can get $15 a pound, well, all of a sudden your profits went up by 50%. You know what I'm saying? So it varies a lot. So it's hard to give people those kinds of numbers because it's just so different. And similarly, there's a lot of places where you can get $5 a pound for lettuce. So what you're going to get is half of what you were expecting before. I would just call your local government. I would just call them and just say, hey, I have a question about this, and they'll put you in touch with the right people. Gene's always got a good comment here. When you're setting your goals, think about your age and your energy level. Very true, Gene. I probably should have mentioned that in the setting goals thing. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But yeah, like if you can only work physically outside for 3 or 4 hours a day, like don't expect you to run around like a 25-year-old. You know what I mean? And I'm feeling that now too. I'm 41, and there's some days I'm tired. I don't want to bust my butt, or it's too hot or whatever. So yeah, be realistic about what you can physically do, because one thing you have to remember, that when you are farming, especially when you're by yourself, if you hurt yourself, there's no one there to do the work. So if you pull your back or hurt yourself in some other way, nothing's going to happen out there. So you have to keep that in mind. Thanks, Gene. I am not growing this summer. Jesse, great question. What should I do first in my first season? Finding customers and then growing what they want, or growing a variety of crops and then finding customers? First season, I would say try growing a few things and seeing what works and what doesn't work, because there might be things that work in your system, or you're better at growing, or your soil wants to handle, because just because a customer wants something and you grow it and you can't grow it and you keep trying. Like, I'd rather have something that grows successfully that maybe you can get less money for, or you have to work a little bit harder to make the sale. So I think the best thing is to figure out like what grows and what you're good at, what you like growing, but take ideas from people and sort of put it all together. Or one thing you can also do is, like, in your first season, you don't have to plant whole beds of things. So like if you have 50-foot beds, like you could plant 25 feet of something and 25 feet of something else and try them out. Try different varieties, try different styles of things. But I would set them up, we'll talk about this in another video, but in standardized beds. But you can like try different things at first. And I've tried this in 2021 with my chefs. I went to them, and before I started growing, I was like, hey guys, because I'd known them before. I said, what do you want? Like, tell me what to grow, I'll grow it. And they were like, like they didn't really give me an answer. So I had to then just pick some stuff and put it in front of them, and then I got sorted out what they wanted and what they didn't want. So it's a little bit of both. There's no clear-cut answer there. So yeah, and I'll talk about like choosing crops and stuff in this video and next week's video. You're welcome, Charles. Raphael, are you starting a farm, man? Let's talk later. It depends on how much money you want to make. I think that's really the bottom line. Or if you're just growing food for your family. As I said, I'm 1/8 of an acre, so it can be pretty small, but it's not a full-time living for me. So, but the beauty about a lot of these systems is how much food you can grow in a very small area. Like if you walk through one of my tunnels and you look at like how much food is growing just in a few beds, you're gonna be like, wow, that's a lot of food. So with these intensive systems, you can grow quite a bit of food in a very small space. So you don't need a lot of space, but as I said, there are other things to think about in terms of storing materials and your nursery and all that other kind of stuff. But this style of farming is not designed to need or necessitate, 50 acres. Like if you had, like I live on a 2-acre suburban lot and most of it's wooded. So again, don't need a ton of land. It really depends on your goals. No, man, I'd love 75 acres. My wife would never let me buy that much land. Kansas garden guy. He's not really asking a question here, but yeah, so if you already have all your tools and tunnels and all that stuff, and you bought everything with product, that's great. You have no debt, which I love. I talk about that a lot. That's great. Now you just focus on getting your systems dialed in, getting your yields up, and trying to increase that profit margin a little bit because you don't have to be buying stuff anymore. All the food you sell, you can pay yourself with. Wouldn't that? That's great. Walk in your worth. This is going to be in the video on Thursday, but the short answer is yes. I don't know about this. I'm unaware of this, unfortunately. How are my seed costs so low? I don't really grow a lot of stuff, so I grow lettuce, carrots, beets, kale. The most expensive seed is Salanova. Carrots are cheap. Beets are really cheap. Kale is cheap. Like, these are cheap seeds. Salanova is the one expensive one for sure. I think I went through maybe 10,000 Salanova seeds last year, maybe less. I can't remember. I went in to place a seed order and I checked. I don't even need to buy Salanova till maybe the fall. So again, like, I don't grow a lot of stuff, and so I don't have to have a big inventory of, like, I grow these carrots, I grow these beets, I grow this kale. I just ordered some squash seed, but like, I really don't buy that much seed. It's very small acreage, and the other thing is I'm transplanting a lot, and when you transplant a lot, you don't need a lot of seed because you're not just like, putting out a lot when you're direct seeding. The carrots is the only thing I'm direct seeding now. Everything else is transplanted, so I don't really go through a lot of seed. Daniel, I will talk about this in a future video about being certified organic. It doesn't matter with chefs, at least the chefs I talk to. It doesn't matter. Jesse does like being certified because it helps him at the farmer's market. So he 100% that's been helpful. I mean, I did go with Jesse to a farmer's market. I made a video with him, and there was at least one person that was like, "Are you organic?" Like, the lady came up and was like, very specifically wanted a certified organic farm. So in some situations, but I will talk about this more. Yeah, dealing with restaurants is tricky when you're first getting started. I think that's true for sure. But I will talk on this more. I do not have a roadside table with an honor box for extra money. I don't live in an area that gets any traffic, so it wouldn't work for me here. I also, most of you know that I do like to keep my private life pretty private, so I don't want people coming by the farm. But that's just me. But again, like, I don't live on a country road where people are driving by and I could put up a sign like that. It wouldn't work where I live. Thanks, Nora. All right, Austin. You're 13. Nice. 2,100 square feet for a business. Yeah, microgreens is going to be your best bet to make profit on that much scale if you can sell them. Just because you can grow it doesn't mean you can sell all that. So maybe you need a big greenhouse that you can grow your microgreens in. You can also do like nursery starts. That's a nice thing if you have a nursery, if you don't want to do in-ground growing. People don't talk about that much, but growing plants for people to get started is another good thing. You can go to a farmer's market and sell that stuff, or set up a stand or bring them to your school or whatever. But microgreens is probably the best bet for just quick cash flow. I would probably say that's probably good on that size scale. But you're going to need either a tunnel or a bunch of lights. I don't know where you are. Are you in Austin? Is that your name? All right, Robert. So you have land and experience, but money to get going is a big roadblock. So this is why I'm talking about part-time farming so much, because whatever you can get to start your farm business, get it going. and then just do it part-time. Take all the money and reinvest it into the business. And after a year or two, you'll have what you need, and then you can start pulling money out. That's the best thing. And I said the best thing to invest in for me in my area is going to be tunnels and soil. For me, that's the most important stuff. Depending on where you are, you may not need tunnels, but it does give you so much more yield and so much more success. So start as small as you can afford and just get really good at growing on small acreage if you don't have the money. So you have to put in the time instead of buying the equipment and stuff. Learn how to grow really well, and then everything you make from that, you're going to have to reinvest. And it's not going to be easy, but if you don't have money and you have time, you have to use one or the other. So if you have money to buy a bunch of tunnels and infrastructure and compost and irrigation, all that stuff, but if you just have time to put in, then you can make it work. It's just going to take a lot longer, but it's hard work. That's the thing. You have to really want it. If you don't have the money, you're going to have to put a lot of time in. Maximilian, good seeing you here, buddy. If you want to grow a wide range of crops, what would be the maximum space you would recommend to grow on full time? I don't have experience on this specifically, but I know, for example, the experience I did have at Raleigh City Farm, if you guys have seen those videos or seen any of the photos, that open field area, it was 1/4 of an acre. And that would be really hard I think about that space and I'm like, man, that would be so much to grow by myself. But again, that was mostly quick turn crops. So if you're doing a lot of long-term stuff, maybe a little bit easier, like stuff that you can plant and then, not have to do much to them. But again, like when it comes time to doing all the planting and you have big harvest days, like if you need to harvest a whole bunch of something one day, like you might need some help. It gets hard when you have a lot more land. Depends on what kind of crops you're growing. But as I said, like if you're growing intensively with this market garden style, like it adds up real fast. I don't remember, we had 42 50-foot beds in that space. And I remember being there, I'm like, dude, this would be a ton by yourself. We were flipping, as I said, like 6 beds a week or 4 to 6 beds a week. Every week we were flipping over, and like there was a couple of us doing it. It would take us half a day some days, depending on what's coming out, what's going in, that sort of thing. So as I said, like start small, get really efficient. I think it's best to like put as much energy into being efficient on a smaller space before you expand. I fell into this trap in 2019 for sure. Like I've talked about it. Like I was expanding. It's like, oh, I'm doing well, expand. Like keep it smaller. I'd even recommend like tunnels over more beds because you're going to get more yield per bed with basically the same input in terms of labor. So those are my recommendations. I'm sure there's people larger. I don't know if this is a tractor farm or not tractor. If you're using a tractor, it's completely different. But if you're using hand tools and stuff, like it's not just the land. It's like you got to think about everything that adds into it. You have to harvest, wash, pack, market, deliver. It all adds up. So like doubling your production is like doubling all of that stuff. And sometimes it's more than double because once you get into larger scale, you're going to have issues with like, do you need to buy a delivery van, right? Like I had to buy a minivan this year because I didn't fit my wagon anymore. So there's a lot of things that come with that. Daniel asked some great questions today. So I think I've talked a little bit, excuse me, about microgreens, and I stopped growing them for a few reasons. One reason was when I was just getting started, right? I was looking at other people's models. Mainly, I was following a lot about what JM was doing and Curtis. Those were the two like market gardening models that I was seeing on a regular basis. And Curtis was like all about microgreens. So I was like, I have to do microgreens because that's the thing. And I was getting into it and I was pretty successful growing microgreens. And when I was doing my weekly boxes to my families, it worked great as like, adding one thing into the box. When I was selling to restaurants, there was a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of variability. Like I would, people would like say, I'll take 5 pounds a week. And then I plan out all the trays. It'd be cool for like 2 weeks. And then they're like, oh, I don't need any this week. I still have some. And I'm like, I have 5 trays. I have 5 trays for you. Like, so it was a little bit hard. It was definitely profitable. And now that I'm talking to chefs and they're telling me what they're paying for microgreens, I'm like, I should probably get back into this. But for me, I personally wasn't enjoying it anymore. And I used it kind of as a crutch because as I was struggling with a lot of the field crops, I was like, all right, I'll just grow more microgreens to cover that cost or whatever. And then what happened is I put more energy into that and less about growing outdoor crops. And I wasn't putting the attention I needed there. And I didn't build up my skill set. I also personally my heart is not in microgreens anymore just because it's like, I'm not really using soil. It's kind of like, it's just very simple. And like, I don't feel like it didn't resonate with me anymore. That was part of it. And for my farm now, I just wanted to keep it literally as simple as possible. I have so much space in my nursery. I could crush it with microgreens. I could make money, but I need to keep this business as simple as possible. I'm just growing veggies and a very small selection of them. So not doing chickens anymore, eggs, any of that stuff. But that's sort of my explanation for it. You have to research your market and figure out like if you can sell microgreens, if people want them, people know what they are, if they're valuable. And then also sometimes there's a lot of people that have caught on to this model of growing microgreens. In some areas, it might be oversaturated. So it's definitely worth trying out. The investment is low, and there's a ton of profit in it if you're careful with it, for sure. But the thing about microgreens is that you have to sell everything. Like it's so like stuff's only good for a short amount of time. You can't store it. So if you grow and it's ready and you don't have anywhere to sell it, like you're going to compost it probably. So. Yes, farmers markets usually do have a fee per season to get in. I think you pay up front and then you're good for the season. Shepherd's Valley Homestead, asking about the CSA model. Effective to have members come out to work on the farm during the season in exchange for a discount on their box. That is totally up to you. You have to really know your customers and think about how you can make that. So you're trading money for labor, right? So if an untrained person comes to your farm, do you have something that they can do there that would save you personally time that you could spend on other things? I think that's the thing you need to sort of equate in your head. It does create amazing community if people are willing to do that. They'll feel even more connected to their food. And if people are literally coming to the farm to work and be part of it, then they're going to be customers for a long time. I bet your retention will be great year to year. But think about that, because what I was thinking about at Raleigh City Farm, for example, and we were talking about getting volunteers there, I was like, well, I hate to have the same people here all the time because I can't have random people show up and then go harvest lettuce for me. Like that's not going to work. But if there's a lot of things that you can think of that would take untrained labor, that would be helpful on your farm, then yeah, that would be great. If it makes sense, right? Like if that trade-off is worth it. Also keep in mind when you have people there working that aren't there all the time, they're going to take a lot of management. So like think about that too. Like if you have 2 people show up to help one day, like how productive are you going to be? Because you're going to be managing them at the same time. So those are the kinds of things I would think about. But again, in an ideal world, and if you can make it work, that's a great way to connect with your customers. I see a lot of side conversations going on here. That's awesome. Kerman, talking about shoestring budget. I don't have a number for you, but you need to make sure you have the bare minimum. So what I mean by that is, do you have, and it depends a lot on what you can get available to you, how much it costs, and also what your soil looks like. Because if you're in an area with unbelievable soil and you don't have to buy a lot of compost, that'll save you a bunch of money. If you're in an area, like if you live in San Diego, that's kind of a bad example. Lands is very expensive there. But in a place like that, like you don't need tunnels because it really doesn't rain, or it doesn't get that super cold a lot of the year. But for me, the money I spent that was the most valuable was like tunnels and soil. I'll keep saying that. But you need to have a decent wash station because, if you're standing outside with a hose, like that's going to get old real fast. or whatever system you're doing. You're trying to wash it in your kitchen or whatever. If you're doing greens, like you need to have a decent green setup. It's not expensive, but you do have to put the time in. But I have to say, like, if you get the minimum stuff that you can do, like a small, commercial farm, like you can get rolling and take all that money and put it back into the farm. But if you don't have the money, like you're going to have to put the time in. But there's some things that are worthwhile spending. And I'll go through like what I think the minimum is in terms of tools and infrastructure and stuff like that. Again, like I don't have a set number because it's just so different. Like everyone's land is different. What's available, like what you can sell food for, it all factors in. So I don't have a number for you. But as I said, like there's some tools you have to buy. Like I even say like the Jang seeder, which is an expensive tool. I think it's like $500. I think that's not negotiable if you're going to market garden. That's one tool that I think you need to get started. You don't need a tilther. If you're going to do baby greens, you need the greens harvester. Like these are tools that for you to like even get into this, I think you need to have some of these basic tools. They're not basic in terms of like cost, but like some of these professional tools like are necessary to start a small commercial farm. So those are the things I'll get into like really what you need to get started in later modules for sure. Hey, John. Yeah, we talked on this a little bit earlier. I would focus mainly on what grows well and then try to sell it. I mean, it's a balance though, because like some things that grow well you might not fetch a lot of money for. So try a mixture. There's a learning curve with all this stuff. At what point you need to get an LLC? Again, not giving business advice. I'm not an attorney or an accountant, but if you're starting a business, you're starting a business. So keep that in mind. Daniel asking great questions, man. My neighbor's cool with the backyard business. So this was interesting because this is like old school stuff, like 2018 stuff. I was like talking about on Instagram. My immediate neighbors, like in my neighborhood, totally cool with it. They love it. The neighborhood behind us, if you've seen some footage, there's like a lot fancier homes back there. And they were having some issues when I had ducks at one point, and they were really loud. They had a problem with that. But otherwise, no. There's been no problems. Everyone's been pretty cool with it. But that's something you should definitely think about, especially if you have animals, because most people don't care if you're growing veggies. But if you're thinking animals, really think about that. There's some zoning laws in certain areas about noise, even like number of chickens you can have in some areas. So keep that in mind too. But if you do have a problem with a neighbor, one of the best ways you can get over that is just bring them some tasty food. They'll be like, oh, this is really good. But yeah, it's good to have conversations with people. It's better to like be cool with your neighbors for sure. So again, if you're just chiming in here, and if you're just showing up, if there's questions that are unrelated to the setting goals module, I'm not going to answer those in this live stream. That's what this is for. If there's a little bit of time at the end, maybe I can take some general questions. But if I'm not responding to the questions you're writing in, that's why. Sebastian from Austria. Oh, nice. I've been to Austria once. It was very cool. Long time ago. Yeah, earn 3,000 next year, 10,000. That's a great way to get started. Assuming that's euros. I have no idea what that is in dollars. Sebastian, did my revenue grow over the first years? Yes, it did. I also kept on changing things around, as I mentioned, like we were doing birds, we were doing eggs and we were doing microgreens and all that stuff. And then I went to Raleigh City Farm for a year. So that like completely changed my trajectory. This year I started over completely. So I don't have, and the farm is very different from what it was before. So I don't have like, here's my growth plan and that sort of thing. But I'm much better at growing food and pushing out more yield and customers and all that stuff. So I don't have the numbers for you, but yes, it's definitely getting better. Tunnels are great almost everywhere. In the summertime, they're also awesome because you can put shade cloth on them and you can have overhead misting to cool them. And like the Farmer's Friend tunnels, which I have, the sides go up all the way, the ends open completely. If you put shade cloth on it and use misting in there, you'll have an advantage over growing outside for sure. Hey guys, well, welcome. There's a lot of people in here. This is great to see everyone here on a Monday afternoon. People go to 4:30 or so. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for coming. Also, big thanks again, I mentioned earlier, to the sponsor, Paper Pot Co. Diego and Paper Pot Co., they've been awesome. I'm so happy to be working with them and all this stuff. And not only are they supporting this in terms of sponsoring it, but Diego's also creating extra things to help you out over at paperpot.co/Josh. Go check it out. Also, listen to Diego's podcast. There's so much great information. He's been doing the Farm Small, Farm Smart podcast for a long time, interviewed a ton of great farmers. I've learned a ton from it. So, yeah, go check that out. Not only for more information, but they have great tools and equipment, and they're a great place to buy things from. So when you're thinking about buying something, go see if they have it. They would be great to support them. So just another big thanks, because this wouldn't happen without their help. So just want to say that again. Someone else asked me at the FSMA ruling. Unfortunately, I don't even know what that is. I need to do some research. The FSMA thing. I don't even know. I think I read about this a while ago. I need to figure that out. You are very welcome. Happy to be here for you guys. Ooh, 2 acres in the city. That's awesome. The best thing about urban farming is like you're right next to your customers. So like even just setting up a farm, if you're in an urban area, like people are going to see it. It's like instant marketing. Also, it's like quick to your customers. You can set up a farm stand there. 2 acres in the city is awesome. All right, this is kind of related, I guess, Scott. How big is the nursery? When I started, I was growing everything under grow lights in my garage, microgreens and starts. So there's a video I did called Professional Microgreens Setup, I think is what it's called. You can go see what I was using. I have a very fancy nursery now, but you can get started with grow lights and a shelf or a rack. Soil blocks all the way. Oh, it's unrelated. I get sucked into the unrelated videos. This is so hard. Unrelated questions. Oh man, people just walking in. Yeah, I've heard this on other farms too. People come and want to check it out. Luckily, like I'm kind of tucked away, so that doesn't happen to me. But man, at Raleigh City Farm, like people come by and talk to me all the time. That's kind of the point of that place, though. All right, so what size tunnel and grow space did I start out with? So when I first started, I had a 12 by 48 foot DIY PVC tunnel. I've made videos about that. And I started with, there was 4 beds in there, 3 or 4 beds in there. And then I had 8 more beds out, which was 50-foot beds. And then I expanded to 16. So I had 16 plus, I had 19 beds to basically start. Well, I started with 11 when I was doing a lot of microgreens. I also had chickens. I was doing eggs. Expanded out to like 20 something, 20, 25, 30 I can't even remember now. 29 maybe. And that was too much for me at the time. So that's how I started, but then eventually going to Raleigh City Farm. Now I have 24 50-foot beds. That's what I got. That is a great question. That's like a whole video. I don't think I know enough to really respond to if microgreens are a fad, but I don't think they're going away anytime soon. They definitely seemed pretty trendy for a while, but once someone did mention to me once that like chefs are always going to want to garnish their food with something. Like before it was like parsley or other herbs and stuff like that, and like microgreens are a great way to do that. So in terms of like a food craze where people are eating them at home, I don't know. I'm sure in some areas it's probably not even popular yet, so I don't know. Pest video will be coming for sure. There will be a video about crop planting for sure. Again, not an accountant or an attorney, so I don't want to give you too much information about this because I'm not the most knowledgeable person. But if it's a business expense for your business, you can probably deduct it. So keep that in mind. One thing you can do is look at the Schedule F. It's a standard form. You can look it up. Just look it up. You'll see what all the itemized areas are that you can deduct for on there. Hey, Amy, thanks for the comment. Competition in your area, in a rural urban area, nurses start with so many starting up due to the pandemic and those looking for more food security. Yeah, there is a lot of people looking to get into farming in 2020 and 2021. I think a lot of people are going to try it and not be successful, unfortunately, because of either they don't like doing it or they're not good at it or they didn't set up their business in a way that it's going to be sustainable or whatever the case may be. Those are things to think about. But if you grow good food and are consistent in an area that you think you can get the money you need to get for your produce, like I think you'll be okay. But you have to think through a lot of that stuff. And you might have to come at it from a different angle. You might have to market it differently or grow different crops or you put yourself in a place where you can sell it a little bit differently. So there's a lot of ways to approach it. But that's why like when people say, how much money can you make? Or how much money you need to get started? Or, you know, like, can I make a living or whatever? It varies so much. And again, competition, things like that. I know like, when I went to the farmer's market with Jesse and did that video, he was starting to realize at the farmer's market, he used to be the only one bringing things like lettuce and carrots and stuff. And now there was a lot of farmers that were bringing that stuff. So he's like, all right, I got to start thinking about other things that I can bring that make me stand out in this crowded marketplace. So with more competition, the people that are good at it will find other creative ways. And also, if you start doing it for a while, you'll have a loyal customer base. So if you're going to the farmer's market all the time, you're going to have customers that come to see you and want to buy food from you specifically, and that'll go a long way. So customer relationships, always important. Beck from Austria. Good to see you. Maximilian, what do you do about if you not lose sight of the goals you set for yourself? I guess one thing is like in writing your business plan that you have your goals. I think that's important. But if you set your goals too high, for example, and you're starting to kill yourself trying to get there, it's okay to make adjustments. You know what I mean? Like if you need the hole to be a certain size and you keep digging and you're not getting there, change the size of the hole, I guess. Is that analogy work? I don't know. Yeah. Be realistic about it for sure. And be okay with changing things. Just because you're like, I'm going to be this guy. I grow this much of this. I grow this much of that. And then you get into it and you're like, well, this thing makes more sense. Like, do that thing. Be flexible with it. Yeah, so how does someone looking at marketing Local Line? Yeah, I did a sponsor video with Local Line last year. They have a really cool system. I don't think a lot of those online sales platforms like Local Line are for marketing. They're kind of just like a sales distribution, sales accountability kind of thing where you can set that up. I wouldn't bank on that kind of stuff to bring in business. That's kind of like if you have customers and you need to manage it, I think that's kind of where that stuff comes into place. And a lot of that can be very helpful, especially you have different kinds of, if you want to do customizable CSAs, I don't know if they're still in business, but like Harvey, Farmigo, and Local Line, those kinds, and there's so many out there. People have sent me messages like, can you come like look at my thing? There's a lot out there, but I don't think of those as marketing. Marketing is going to be social media, which is going to only give you limited reach, but it's the marketing is like networking, farmers markets, word of mouth, that kind of stuff. That's how you're going to get a lot of customers. I wouldn't put a lot of faith in just like an online platform to push yourself out there, unless they're promising that and they have like large email distribution lists. And I don't know. I didn't get that vibe from Local Line, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they've changed some stuff. Uh, 1,750 feet of bed space on 1/6 of an acre. One at $7,500 is an ultimate goal. Well, is the garden going to grow food that you'd be otherwise buying? Because like you can grow a lot of food in that much space for your family. You could probably cut your family food costs down. And I think I think if you're really just interested in growing and supporting your family, like one thing you can do is just grow a lot of your food. Like imagine if you didn't have to grow, if you went to the supermarket and you bought half as much as you normally did. Like that would save you a lot of money too. Again, a lot of time goes into that, but if it's something you really enjoy doing, that's an option. Yeah, 7,500. I mean, that's like one tunnel for me. Yeah, I think you could do 7,500 in a year, but you'd be growing like probably one crop to get the successions. Like you'd be the lettuce guy or the carrot guy or whatever. Because to have successions, you'd have to have many beds of the same crop. So I think that's the issue you'd be getting into on that much space. But again, you could save a lot of money for your family by growing a lot of food. What was the biggest challenge you faced when starting your farm? These questions are awesome. They make me really think. I think it was just learning how to grow food. Like I had no experience. Like I literally had, gardening was like my wife, she was into that stuff. I was just like, I got to learn how to do this. That was probably the biggest challenge, is like getting good at it. And coming from a production background, so what I did after teaching, I was a professional brewer for 5 years. And so for me, that was very repeatable, right? But like farming is not like that at all. It's very variable. I think it was just a lot of the skills in learning how to grow. And getting things to work on my land. I don't have a very straightforward space here. Tiny house. Awesome. So again, if I'm not responding to your questions, it's because it's unrelated to the first module. So apologize for that. But I want to keep focused on being focused on that. Would only growing 4 things instantly work in a market context? Yeah, that would be great. If you came to the farmer's market and you had like 4 things all the time, you'd be the guy for those things or the girl for those things. I think it'd be good to have one thing kind of mixed up in the group. So like for me right now, I have 3 main crops: lettuce, carrots, and beets. And I have 1 seasonal. That's all I'm growing. So I'm growing kale right now, and then in the spring I'll have patty pan squash. So that's what I do. But I'm selling to restaurants. But I think it'd be fine at a farmer's market too. The one thing to keep in mind if you only have 4 crops going to the farmer's market is that, I should be saving this for the next video, but your how much you're selling to each customer is not going to be as much, so you need more customers, more interactions. So I talked about this in the first video, actually, if you want to check that out, but I just want to grow food for my family originally. I didn't mean to be a farmer. Again, I can't answer this for everywhere about setting up a farm stand. A lot of places, if it's agriculture based, yes, but I as I said, like, check with your local authorities before you do that. No, don't do a DIY tunnel. Go buy a kit. Hands down, go buy a kit. Farmer's Friend, so easy. This video is not sponsored by Farmer's Friend. They have sponsored stuff in the past, but I use 3 of their tunnels on a daily basis, and just buy a kit. Yes. We'll get into talking about which crops to grow and stuff, but no, I can't make money on that stuff on this size scale. Jesse, I have not used any software to plan things. That is not a strength of mine. When I talk about crop planning, I'll get into how I do it, which is not the most efficient way to do it. It just works for me. But no, I don't use much software. The only software I use is Square for invoicing and QuickBooks for accounting. I think that's about it. Texting chefs use the phone. I don't know. Tiny house. I talked about this earlier, but again, non-accountant or an attorney, but look at the Schedule F form if you're in the United States. That'll show you all the line items of the things you can deduct for a farm expense. Yes, the goals are a little bit of a chicken and egg situation for sure. We talked a little bit earlier in this live stream about one of the things you want to do when you get started is to figure out what works and what you like growing. I think that's a huge thing to help yourself determine what's going to work for you, because, you know, as I said earlier, also, like, I was looking at systems that were put in place by, you know, the systems that were developed by like J.M. Fortier and Curtis Stone, like those guys, and Richard Perkins. Those were the guys that I was looking to for influence when I was getting started, and they're in very different contexts and climates than I'm in. So, you know, you have to figure out what's going to work for you, and then once you have a little bit of that experience, then you try to sell it. You'll get feedback. You'll make adjustments. It is a little bit of a chicken egg kind of situation for sure. Mike, I'll get into a lot of this crop planning and stuff later. This is a little bit more specific. There's a particular goal that you should set at the beginning. Probably hours. Probably how many hours to put in on the farm. I think that would have been one of my initial goals, because I put in a ton of time and it was taking up all my spare time. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's also hard sometimes because it's hard to turn it off. I know if any of you guys are entrepreneurs, or even have an inkling of being an entrepreneur, it's hard to turn that off. And when your job is at your house, it's very hard to keep yourself from working on it all the time. So I think setting like a realistic goal about hours or things like that, I think would have been helpful. Okay, Broken Arrow. Can a person sell produce along with canned goods that you make, like salsa? In most situations, no. Now, again, it's going to depend everywhere, but in a lot of situations, the way I understand it is if you're just selling raw vegetables that are not fermented, cooked, processed, the laws are pretty simple. Like, you can just sell them for the most part. Once you get into making things like salsa and hot sauce and canning and fermenting and all that stuff, you then usually need a commercial kitchen. And then there's licensing and permitting and there's other stuff that you have to deal with. And I don't know about that stuff because I have not gotten into that. I just literally sell raw vegetables. So you're going to have to check in your local laws and stuff about that. But I just want to make sure that you realize you can't do that legally in most places. Maybe there are some places you can. I just don't know. All right. I'm almost getting to the end of this. So maybe I'll take a couple of general questions. I'm not going to go back through, but if you have a couple of general questions, maybe I can get into that now. If you guys are sticking around till the end of this, that would be cool. Maybe I'll take like 4 or 5 questions and try to wrap this up. It's been talking forever. How many restaurants I sell to? Right now it's between 4 and 6. I did have up to 8 customers at one point in the spring. It was too many for me. I'm kind of between 4 and 6 right now. Some of that is not every customer orders every week. Some of it is I have to like cut back if I don't have enough and that sort of thing. So this is the toughest time of year right now is the hunger gap, right? Because the stuff I planted in late summer, early fall is mainly harvested out now. And so now I'm getting into the stuff that I planted in the fall, which is what the third tunnel was for. So that's where that's at. All right, so on to a couple general questions. I'll take a couple general questions before we wrap it up. What about using the tunnels in a high wind location? You have to be very careful about this. One thing I would do is if for example, if you want to buy something from Farmer's Friend, I would call them and tell them what your situation is, and they will tell you what you can have there and what's safe and what precautions you need to take in terms of shape of the structure, getting it attached to the ground, all that kind of stuff. I think the Quonset ones, the round ones, like I have the Gothic ones, the pointy ones. The Gothic ones are not as good in the wind. But again, like if you know, like, hey, I have windy days where it's 50, 60 miles an hour. I don't have tree cover. I don't have wind blocks. Call the company. Like that's what they're there for. And let me piggyback on that too. Don't forget you can call your seed companies too. I think people don't think about that. If you have questions about what seeds will work in your area, call your seed company because they'll be like, oh, this does not do well in the south or this does not do well in the northwest. So, yeah. Which kind of broad forks do I recommend? I've only used a few. The one I have is from my friend Larry. He makes broad forks. He's in North Carolina. I did a couple videos with Larry. Also, the sponsor of this video, Paper Pot Co. sells the some really nice broad forks, which I would probably buy if I didn't have one from Larry. So I would go check those out for sure. Those are awesome too. To me, it's not like specifically about number of tines or shape. It's got to be strong, you know? I'm blanking on the name of the brand, unfortunately, but Paper Pot Co. sells them. It's one of the products they have. The broad fork I had before I bought, I forget where I bought it from, but the tines bent all the time. I would use a rotary hoe to break in new ground. You can. I mean, we'll get into breaking ground and stuff in a different video, but you got to ask yourself, like, why are you breaking ground? That's sort of the point. Like, how is that going to help your situation? You could use a tiller, a rotary plow, rotary hoe. I think at that point it doesn't really matter. I think some people think the rotary hoe or rotary plow is less damaging to the soil, but I mean, like I tilled out back here beforehand because I needed to level the ground, but that was the only time I did that. So if that's a tool you have, you can use that for sure. Jesse, 60-minute drive from a metropolitan market area, realistic or too far? This is related to the module. I don't think it's too far, but you have to make it make sense for you. I know farms that drive that far and they have like a really killer farmers market that they go to. A great example is Osawaga, which hopefully you've seen before. They're an amazing farm. I did a growers live with them, and they got a killer system going on there. Cool people, but they drive into Boston to sell. They have a killer farmers market, which is actually in my hometown, which is funny when I figured that out. And it's worth it for them. So it depends. Yeah, I think an hour is fine if that's like the one thing that you have to do, and you have a really strong market, and you can get rid of your products there at a good price. I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I drive 30 minutes each way to my market now. If it was worthwhile, I think it would work. But again, it has to be worth it. Like Austin, who's saying here? Nora's asking about gas. Yeah, I mean, it all comes into it, gas and time and all that stuff. And what's your vehicle like that you're driving? Okay, I am running off our house well. I have talked about this before, and I will talk about this in my irrigation video. I have not had trouble running it dry. When our well pump went out a few years ago, when the people came to replace it, I asked them a ton of questions about flow rate, the pump they're putting in, what my well was capable of, and I just asked them all the questions. And most of the time when, I'm not an expert on wells whatsoever. I just ask the dudes like a million questions. When you set up a well, they'll test it to see how much water it will support, and then they'll put in the pump that will match that flow. If I'm wrong about this, you guys can let me know. So basically, like, they told me I can run the pump for as long as I want. So yeah, I haven't had that problem, but I don't have a ton of flow. So what I have to do is really like space out my waterings so that I get enough flow to everything. And like even my overhead misting, I can't do 100 feet at once. I don't have enough water to do that. So I have to break it into 2 50-foot zones. Yeah, Larry is the man. No, Alex, 6 weeks is not long enough to tarp. Even in the middle of summer, 6 weeks is super, super quick. You're not going to kill everything. You are very welcome. I don't know exactly all of Elaine's methods. I do make some compost here, and I will, in a module, talk about what I do. But the reality is, in my system, I need so much compost, and the people that make it professionally are so much better than I am at making it. Because when you're talking about needing this much compost, when you're playing this export game of vegetables, right? You're growing vegetables, all those nutrients are leaving your farm all the time. You have to bring in materials. So either you have to spend the time, effort, money to build infrastructure and do all the composting and bring in sources like food waste and carbon and all this stuff. Like once you factor all that in, it just makes more sense to buy it. Like that's in my situation. That's what I've determined. Now I still do compost here, and I will talk about what I do here, but that's not like for my main inputs. Like I could probably make a couple of yards a year here at most, but I'm going to use that in like my flower beds around my house and, some other stuff maybe, here and there. I might put some in my beds in the summer. But in terms of like killing weed seeds and all that kind of stuff, that's where I just lean on getting commercial compost. But if you're in an area that you can't get commercial compost that's free of pesticides, herbicides, that is high quality, doesn't have weed seeds in it, like you might want to consider that, but keep in mind, like there's a lot of time and stuff that gets into it. So oh, Daniel, you're going to have to check out my other channel, man. This is the Shure SM7B. This is like the classic podcast mic. Oh, okay. So heavy, wet clay soil. Yeah, break ground. But if you break ground, like don't just break ground to break ground because it's just gonna get more compacted after you till or break it up. So either you got to infuse some organic matter or get some cover crops growing, get some roots in the ground to open up the soil. All right, a couple more questions. Mostly drip, a little bit of misting in the summer. I'll go over that. If you look up my irrigation video, I kind of talk about all that stuff. I think it's called How I Water My Plants. 100 question person. Yeah. The guys were like, all right, enough. And I was like, yeah, but I just want to know a little bit more about my well. Yeah, it was cool. Thanks, Broken Arrow. All right. I think I'll try to wrap this up. So we're going an hour and a half. I'm about out of energy anyways, thanks guys for coming today. I really do. I'm so appreciative of everyone's support, and I hope this helps as many people as possible. So just a reminder, modules will come out on Thursdays, and Q&As will be the following Monday. So keep a lookout for that. The one that's coming up on this Thursday will be researching your market and selling your products. So another sort of business-heavy module, but it's important stuff to talk about. So hopefully you guys will check that out, and we'll see you guys next Monday. And hopefully you're having a decent late winter, early spring. Well, it's not really spring yet, but we had a warm day today. So I really appreciate it, everyone. Thanks for coming along today. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't already. And really appreciate it. And again, big thanks to Paper Pot Co. for sponsoring this. Take care, guys.